Disney's most recent live action remake, Lilo and Stitch, is making waves at the box office. Snow White, however, is on the cusp of entering the streaming circuit, and it's caused much controversy when it came out earlier in the year. So, is Snow White worth checking out when it hits Disney Plus and VOD, or will it leave you grumpy instead of happy? Well, stick around and I'll let you know my take. Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Sean Morgan, and I love movies. I love all movies and I want them to do well and be of good quality. I'm not generally a fan of this practice Disney is dedicated to, that being the live action remake sort of carousel that they're on right now. But if they insist on doing it, I will continue to hope that the final products are good and harbor some interesting craft or at least engaging performances. The Snow White live action remake has been on my radar for quite a while as it's been developing, mostly because I quite like Rachel Ziegler. I think she's extraordinarily talented. Her breakout, of course, was Steven Spielberg's West Side Story remake. Disney's 2025 live action adaptation of Snow White, directed by Mark Webb, it reimagines the beloved 1937 animated classic with a contemporary lens, starring the aforementioned Rachel Ziegler as Snow White and Gal Gadot as the Evil Queen. The film introduces audiences to a more assertive and proactive version of the princess than in the original animated feature. This is to, of course, make an attempt at aligning with modern sensibilities while retaining the sort of enchantment and the fantasy vibe of the original source material. In this retelling for the current day, Snow White is portrayed not as a damsel in distress, but as a determined young woman who is seeking to reclaim her kingdom from the clutches of her malevolent stepmother. Rachel Ziegler delivers a performance that I think should be praised, as I think she has a fantastic presence and a singing voice very matched for this style of old school Disney musical. Her rendition of new musical numbers, such as Waiting on a Wish, showcases her vocal prowess and brings depth to the character that was not necessarily there before, given that the original feature is so tight. That song is a great sort of I want song, Waiting on a Wish, in my opinion. I am a big fan of musicals, so I was predisposed to giving this movie some slack. I also think it should be commended that this is very VFX heavy movie, and Ziegler is still able to maintain presence while acting opposite many effects driven characters. She's basically an infant in her movie stardom still, and seems here to stay for good reason. She does not really seem out of place when acting opposite. I don't know if they were doing tennis balls or fully CG characters, but that kind of specific interaction that she's tasked with having so often throughout the course of the runtime. Now, Gal Gadot's portrayal of the evil queen offers a glamorous yet menacing antagonist, and while many folks found her performance to be over the top, I can see why others might have appreciated the campy flair that she brought to the role. I do agree with this general consensus that is formed that Gal Gadot is not a very talented actress. I think she skates by here on the sheer fact that the character on the page is not that deep to begin with. Godot has a very narrow skill set that does happen to work here, in my opinion. And also, I think it works in the first Wonder Woman film. I can't say that I've enjoyed many of her other performances in other films. There's also the caveat that she harbors some political opinions I don't agree with, but I won't hold that against a performer if they turn in a performance that is particularly outstanding. I prefer to critique the work on the work alone. And this take on the Evil Queen is not outstanding. It is just merely passable. I think she's maybe getting a little bit more flack than she deserves as far as the performance itself goes here. Um, the film features a blend of some classic songs like Hi Ho and Whistle While You Work, alongside new compositions by Benj Pasek and Justin Paul. Numbers such as Good Things Grow and The Evil Queen's All Is Fair, I found them to be catchy and memorable enough, breathing a little bit of fresh life into the narrative. I can't stand, for example, when modern movie musicals are shamelessly shying away from having their songs sound like musical theater so that they can air those songs on like the typical radio, or so that they can get them on the airwaves in like your local Target or Kohl's or whatever. And I don't sense that that was the intention here throughout these pieces. These songs sound like songs that belong in movies or musicals. They don't sound like they're happening to be in this narrative, but also might work on the radio or if you're in an Uber. I have that problem with The Greatest Showman, for example. I think a lot of those songs sound tailor made to be played anywhere and everywhere and just make as much money as possible rather than sounding like old school movie musicals that I prefer. That's neither here nor there. Visually speaking, Snow White is less offensive than the trailers and marketing led me to believe. Director Mark Webb is known for The Amazing Spider Man. He crafts a world here that I think balances nods to the original animation with the contemporary aesthetic. It's still a CGI landscape that looks far worse than shooting in real locations would have looked, but being steeped in the universe of the film eventually made me accept my surroundings. I was not squirming from beginning to end, even if I prefer more tactile and realistic visuals. And of course, the film is not without controversies that have nothing to do with the actual film making itself. The casting of Rachel Ziegler, who, in my understanding, is of Colombian and Polish descent, it sparked debates about fidelity to the original character's description. And I don't really think that matters very much at all, especially because, one of the first lines of the movie basically justifies the Snow White moniker, despite Ziegler being a person of color. And that should never really have caught on as a talking point in the first place. Who really cares that hard about this? Um, for a character whose identity is very tied to race, I understand controversies like that. Like, obviously, if they were recasting like someone like Black Panther, that would be very strange to cast someone who was not black. But for something like an old Disney princess, where race is not really a factor in the story itself, I don't think it matters, and it never should. Additionally, the decision to reimagine the Seven Dwarves as CGI supernatural beings, rather than casting actors with actual dwarfism, that drew criticism from various quarters of the internet and the real world. That's an interesting conversation that I think is more understandable to engage with. I think there would be justifiable cases for outrage had Disney went either way. Had they casted all dwarfs, because then the conversation is okay. Is this all dwarf people with dwarfism? Excuse me. Is this all they're offered in the modern landscape? But then alternatively, this CGI thing is like, okay, well, you're taking an opportunity from a group that already has limited opportunities. It's so dicey. I can't pretend to know the nuances that the dwarfism community faces in this regard, so I prefer to not really crack open that issue with any real severity here. I'm going to leave that conversation to people with more bona fides. Um, so Ziegler's public critiques also of the 1937 original film as being sort of regressive, that caught on in ways that I think isn't really necessary. Like, I don't think she was saying the film was bad. I think she was just saying that objectively it is kind of regressive in that a prince needs to save a hapless woman. That really, I don't think matters or should matter as far as controversy goes. And Ziegler's political statements regarding Israel Palestine also led to some polarized reactions, with some calling for outright boycotts of the film because of them. People also called for boycotts from other political vantage points because of Gal Gadot's support for Israel. These controversies contributed to a mixed critical reception, I think, likely due to review bombing from both the right and the left of the political spectrum. Worth noting, though, is that audiences across the board were more favorable. Audiences who actually saw the film awarded it a cinema score of B plus. Folks who physically saw the film in a theater walked out and regarded it with relative positivity. So that is super interesting to me. Uh, you know, with a production budget estimated between 240 and 270 million dollars, Snow White only grossed approximately 205 million dollars worldwide. It topped some regional box office charts upon its release, but the overall earnings fell very short of expectations, leading analysts to label it a box office disappointment. I think understandably so. The appetite just wasn't there, I guess, for this particular apple, if you'll forgive my pun. People either didn't want a remake of this specific film, or the controversies bled too far into the consciousness of the public. I'm not really sure what the death nail was here, the final blow. Who's to say? Despite the controversies and financial underperformance, though, I think Disney's 2025 Snow White remake stands out to me as a commendable effort. I think if they're going to do these live action remakes, this was a, you know, decent attempt to modernize a classic tale. Rachel Ziegler has a performance that is captivating. I think the musical editions are a little bit innovative. They're not, they're not going into my Spotify playlists or anything, but I listened to them once or twice more after leaving the theater, which is more than I can say for some of the other original songs of recent memory, particularly some of the Mufasa ones. I know that that movie has its defenders too. Um, the movie resonated with me. What can I say? It's not without its flaws, but this adaptation clicked for me. I was very much expecting it to be terrible, and I was pleasantly surprised by how much the final feature actually worked for me. I found myself feeling twinges of emotion during the final climactic moments, which I really was not anticipating. Something about the DNA of this story connected with me, despite the storm of controversies and the objective creative flaws. I don't know how to explain it. Sometimes a movie just hits you and you're not expecting it to. So, where would this film rank on my scale of A list, amazing, average, abysmal, or needs to be abolished? Well, this film is very imperfect, and I am opposed to the live action Disney remakes on a fundamental level. But I found myself enjoying Snow White so much more than I expected. The titular performance is great. I liked the new songs enough. The visuals did not offend me as much as I thought they would, and the emotional core of the movie somehow did find its way to connect with me. For that reason, I will be giving Snow White 2025 a strong average rating, maybe like an emphatic 3.5 stars if I converted that into a numerical rating out of 5. So, did you see this Snow White remake, Snow White 2025, I keep calling it? I think Disney just calls it Snow White. Did you see it? If you did you actually find anything about it to be good? I'm not claiming that it's some sort of Oscar worthy masterpiece, but I was personally shocked by how much I actually liked the movie, since it seems like everyone on every side of every political spectrum has visceral hatred for some aspect of this movie. Also, if Disney insists on continuing these live action remakes, which animated classic do you think might actually work as far as a live action adaptation? I think an adaptation of their Treasure Planet could prove pretty interesting. That's one that I would pick for sure. I think that even though it would piss off the diehard Treasure Planet hive, you could change a whole bunch of things in that film and make it feel like a new science fiction adventure with plenty of, I guess, franchise potential too, since that's one, of major importance to studios nowadays. Anyways, feel free to answer any and all of those questions in the comments section below, or none of them. I'm not your boss. Whatever you want. Feel free also to like this video or subscribe to the channel for thoughts on more streaming releases and theatrical releases as they come out. But thank you so much for watching this video, though. I appreciate it. Until next time, stay safe and don't bite any apples given to you by strangers. Stranger danger is real. Bye.